Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watch You Want, and thanks for logging on. Today we are looking at Panerai's Love Letter to the Classic Yachts Challenge, circa 2008, part of that year's special series, one of 500 made. This is the Panerai Luminor Regatta Chronograph. Now, every year since 2003, Panerai has been an official sponsor of the Classic Yachts Challenge. Essentially, if you've seen events like the Mille Miglia or the Tour Auto, where vintage automobiles come to compete in controlled conditions in road rallies, that's sort of what the Classic Yachts Challenge is. It's a place where vintage racing and pleasure sailboats can come to compete in a structured, controlled environment and sort of relive their glory years while everyone has fun while doing it. And the Classic Yachts Challenge every year gives birth to at least one Panerai Special Edition, and this was it for 2008, the PAM 308. This is a Regatta Chronograph, a little bit sportier than your contemporary Panerai Luminor Chronograph. It is a company born of the sea, originally of amphibious maritime warfare, increasingly of sailing the high life, the good life on the water, rather than below it. And you can see that in the tachometer bezel, in the blue highlights of the dial, in the inverted hobnail or waffle pattern of the dial base, and on the wrist, with this accordion-style diving strap. It's very comfortable. Fully brushed steel, 44 millimeters in diameter. This is the classic so-called Panerai case, and it feels quite supple on the wrist. A big part of that is the strap. Now, the strap can make or break any watch that's designed to be worn in the wet. This definitely makes it. Panerai straps are incredibly comfortable, and the classic cushion case profile of the Luminor Chrono means that it really distributes its weight nicely, and while I'm always afraid that crown guard's going to dig into my skin, I just can't seem to get it to interfere with the motion of my wrist or the skin on top. So clearly, what was right for 1950 is right today. The Panerai Luminor still wears a treat on the wrist. Now, my wrist is 6 1/3 inches, 16 centimeters in circumference, but I'm nowhere near testing the lower limits of this case. I really do feel like you could wear this watch comfortably if your wrist is even as small as 5 3/4 inches around, so under 15 centimeters in circumference. Now, the keys to the style of this watch are all wrapped up in the treatment of the case, the bezel, and the dial, and I want to focus on each one in turn. Now, the case is that classic squat, almost tuna can cushion form, about a 1-to-1 aspect ratio. This is the shape we associate with the Panerai Luminor. So even though this is a special edition and a complicated Luminor, eyes closed, you know exactly what it is. And the shape, the crown guard, the proportions, they all read as classic Panerai. It's the brushed finish that makes this one a bit more discreet, and I really like that because it's got an understated grace and elegance to it, and it hides its mass. It pairs its bulk a little better with a brushed steel treatment. Now, there is a little bit of a highlight around the circumference of the bezel edge. You can see it here, and it works as exactly that, a highlight, jewelry, an accent. It's not dominant, it doesn't overwhelm, and from the head-on shot, you don't even notice it, but it's there, and I think it's a nice touch that breaks up the monotony of the brushed finish and provides a nice step between the case top and the bezel, a nice visual separation. And that separation segues to a tachometer scale. Tachometers traditionally haven't been part of the Panerai canon, but since the relaunch of the brand in 1993, there's pretty much always been one sportier Panerai chronograph reference with a tachometer in the catalog. Originally, it was the first of the Mare Nostrums during the mid-90s. The Mare Nostrum chronographs were short-lived, but they featured the first modern appearance of a tachometer scale on a Panerai chronograph, and this PAM 308 continues the tradition. Now, you're not going to be timing anything going 400 kilometers per hour in the open ocean, but it's nice to know that if you are timing something across a 1 kilometer course, simply starting the chronograph and reading the position off the bezel when your subject passes the second point, the stop point, that'll give you a good sense of how fast the object is going. So if I were to start the chronograph like so and wait for the second's hand to trace its way to 400, let's say this is where my object starts moving, and then boom, right there at 350, the object crosses the end of the kilometer. Because the distance is fixed and I have the time, I can now read the speed of that object over the kilometer, 350 units per hour, so kilometers per hour. Read it right off the tachometer. That's what a tachometer does on a watch. This is a tachymeter, not the tachometer, so to speak, the engine RPM counter that you find in your car. I've had some questions about that. Perhaps I should be a little bit more careful in enunciating tachymeter rather than tachometer, but this is the function it performs. It is a timing device, it is a speed sensing device that works in conjunction with the chronograph. And moving inward from that calibrated bezel, you see the dot index hour track. Now this is very legible at night. It's not the classic Panerai sandwich dial. It's something entirely different and completely special. By combining these heavily loomed dot indices with what are known as the sausage style or raised Roman or Arabic numerals at 12 and 6, you get a completely different look than the standard Panerai Luminor. And because you have this inverted hobnail waffle cut, and you can sort of see it when I turn it into the light, it's like the inverse of a Royal Oak, Audemars Piguet Royal Oak tapisserie dial. The tapisserie is raised. This is actually sunken in, so each of these is like a little well sunken into the grid across the dial. And there's great contrast with the graphics, Luminor Regatta and Panerai actually being placed on raised blocks that rise above the hobnail, and each of these indices towering over the base of that inverted hobnail dial, plus the individually cut out sub-seconds at 6 o'clock and the 30-minute chronograph counter at 3 o'clock. You've got a lot of detail, articulation, texture, and visual interest here. Definitely reads as more interesting, more dynamic, and more nuanced than a conventional Panerai Luminor dial. That's just my opinion, but I think in person, the striking effect of this treatment is self-evident. I think others would agree. Now, there is a calibration from 0 to 5 minutes on the 30-minute subdial for the chronograph here at 3 o'clock, and that's specifically for regatta purposes. Because so much of regatta racing revolves around timing the interval until your start between matches, you need a chronograph with some sort of countdown functionality. And that little blue calibration will reset the chrono right here, but that little blue calibration times minutes 1 to 5 so you can visually see the time remaining until your scheduled start. So you have your seconds and you have your minutes. It is a bi-register chronograph, and these are the prominent elements that are emphasized on the dial. You can see the hands themselves. Hours, minutes, and seconds are black oxidized, so while the loomed sections jump out, the rest of the hands blend into the dial, and it's a nice stealth effect. Nicely understated, emphasizing that the purpose of this watch is water sports, and the focal point of this Luminor Regatta is the chronograph. But the rest of the watch is classical Luminor, including the device protecting the crown. Now, from the beginning of the use of this device, roughly 1950, patented in 1956 by Panerai, it's a solution to the problem of threaded crowns and screw-down crowns. Now, you see how easily I can pull that crown out to set the time? You can also see how easily I push it back in. Now I can wind it. There is no threading to hold it in. It's not like an Omega Seamaster or a Rolex Submariner. I can move it in and out freely without wearing out the threading and the seals on the crown. It also makes it far easier to manipulate. Simply lift the lever and do what you must with it when your hands are wet, sweaty, or you're wearing gloves. And that was Panerai's solution back in the 50s. It works just as well, and it cuts just as distinctive a profile today. Part of the side benefits of this is that you have a full 360-degree guard all the way around, every aspect protecting that crown. And it provides a little bit of cover for the chronograph pushers, which are recessed, so you're more likely to find that the crown guard will deflect blows, or the lugs will deflect blows that would otherwise affect the pushers on a conventional chronograph. So even on this complicated Panerai reference, the crown guard continues to pay dividends for the secondary functions of the watch. Now on the case back, 2008 Special Series, true to form, you see this watch pays tribute to the Classic Yachts Challenge, individually numbered 1 of 500, beautifully engraved little classical image of the Panerai Luminor case flank, nicely polished. You can also see that the watch features the 2007 onward Panerai Luminor quick release lugs. So with the equipment included with this watch, you can actually pull out the bar. It's not a spring bar, it's a locking bar, so very secure, but you can simply depress this button, pull out the bar, swap the strap off for leather, for textile, or what have you. Any aftermarket strap will work. It features the classical 24mm Panerai Luminor lug spacing, so there is literally a universe and a half of accessory straps that you can swap onto this watch in the comfort and convenience of your own home without engaging a jeweler. Now, it is a manual wind watch using the rarely seen Valjoux 7763 manual winding variant of the famed 7750 chronograph caliber, 100-meter water resistance to protect that manual wind caliber within the watch. It really is the all-purpose sporting watch. A COSC-rated chronometer with a 46-hour power reserve, very tough, classically styled as a Panerai Luminor, but with a sporty accent and regatta focus as a Luminor Regatta Chronograph. See this 1 of 500 Panerai Luminor Regatta Chronograph, 44 millimeters in stainless steel. This PAM 308 is available on our website, Watch You Want.